It's early November, and you know what that means. It is time to feed fall pumpkins to our pigs. Hey, it's Rob from Untitled Family Farms. We've been feeding fall pumpkins to our pigs now for 4 years. And in this video, we're going to talk about the nutrition of fall pumpkins. We're going to talk about the benefits of feeding fall pumpkins to our pigs. We're also going to talk about the drawbacks and the negative parts of it. And then we'll conclude with how to get free fall pumpkins for your pigs. So stay tuned and let's get going. I usually break up the pumpkins. It's easy to break them up by throwing them on the ground. But what I've found is as far away as I am from the pigs, I can get more pumpkins into my tractor loader if I go on and cut them with a machete. Now, when we start talking about pumpkin nutrition, pumpkins are 87% water. So that means that if you have 1,000 pounds of pumpkins, then you only have about 130 pounds of dry matter. So that would be the equivalent of roughly 130 pounds to 150 pounds of grain, depending on how dry the grain is. So if you have 1,000 pounds of pumpkins and 130 pounds of dry matter feed, of that 130 pounds, only about 11% to 12% of that dry matter of the pumpkins is actually protein. So that means in 1,000 pounds of pumpkins, you'll have about 14 pounds of protein that you're feeding to your pigs. Before I go any further, let me just say these little pumpkins are much heavier and they have much more feed value to them than do your standard jack-o'-lantern pumpkins. They're a little bit harder to open, but they have, by volume, they have a lot more feed value. So pumpkins are primarily water. They also have some protein and a good bit of energy. They carry a lot of potassium, zinc, manganese, phosphorus, some calcium, vitamin A, along with some antioxidants. So they provide a good source of diverse nutrition for pigs. The problem is they're very heavy compared to the feed value that you get out of them because of the water content. There are several benefits to feeding pumpkins to pigs. One of those is that for us here at Untitled Family Farms, we do try to help reduce community waste into landfills, especially if we can compost them or recycle them on the farm. And so if we can keep several thousand pounds of pumpkins out of landfills and feed our pigs in the process, we are excited and happy to do that. The biggest thing is they provide a diverse feed value at a time of the year when there's not a whole lot of other feeds available for our pigs on pasture. Obviously, we continue to feed dump milk to our pigs. We also continue to feed grain to our pigs when we need to. We supplement them with grain. But by November and December, the pigs have eaten most of the acorns in their fenced areas on the farms, and the summer forages have stopped growing. This year we had an early frost about mid-October. We haven't had any more since those first couple days of frost, but the summer grasses and summer forages are not growing. The winter forages have just been planted, but it's still really dry, so they're not growing very well. And so the pumpkins offer a great alternative feed to just grain and milk for our pigs. Now let's go take these to the pigs and we'll keep talking about the benefits of feeding pumpkins to pigs. So in addition to some of the additional nutrition that we get out of feeding pumpkins to our pigs, we also get more free food because the pigs will not eat all the seeds, and as a result we have pumpkins growing all over the farm throughout the year, and the cows or the pigs will bust them open and eat them. One of the benefits you'll hear people talk about when they're feeding pumpkins to their pigs is that pumpkins will deworm pigs. I'm just here to tell you, you cannot just feed pumpkins to pigs and completely deworm your pigs. There are, and there may be cases where pumpkins help with that process. Troy at Red Tool House has a video on feeding pumpkins to pigs and talks about how they're just it paralyzes the worms, and if you kill the worms when the pigs poop them out, that you can deworm your pigs effectively that way. I trust him much more than I trust myself. But let me say this, if you're just feeding pumpkins to pigs like I am, you cannot count on them as a full dewormer. Perhaps if you're feeding just grower pigs like these aren't going to be breeders, they're just going to be processed in a few months, and it may not be a big deal. However, once you get started breeding pigs, the worming can be a much more significant issue. Last year I fed 6,000 or 8,000 pounds of pumpkins and pumpkin seeds to our sows, and 2 months later the sows gave birth. One of the sows had a parasite load that was transferred to her piglets in utero and through milking, and 7 of those 8 piglets died. So let me just say, relying on pumpkins alone to worm your pigs is not a very good strategy. However, if it helps reduce the parasite loads of the pigs, all the better. We still worm our breeders, especially with ivermectin and febendazole. We do that on a rotational basis. Biggest benefit of feeding pumpkins to the pigs, though, is it can be a tremendous feed source for your pigs that's free if you happen to be able to get free pumpkins and a lot of them. There are a lot of downsides to feeding pumpkins to pigs. One, pumpkins act as a natural laxative, from what I'm told. I can tell you that if you feed pumpkins to pigs, you'll notice their poop is orange, and that's got to be counted for as well with your feeding regimen. If you're going to feed pumpkins to pigs, make sure you feed it into an overarching plan for nutrition. Some of the stuff I've read is that the dry matter of pumpkin feed should be no more than 10% of their dry matter intake. To put that into perspective, if we're feeding 200 pounds of grain, we can have 20 pounds of their daily feed be pumpkins, but that's dry weight of pumpkins, so we can feed these pigs 300 or 400 pounds of wet pumpkins, and it'll be plenty enough. But you've got to calculate it based on the dry matter of the feed. But the biggest thing about feeding pumpkins to pigs is you get a free feed source. It also comes at a time of the year where the pigs have eaten most of the acorns on the farm, so it's a diversity of feed ingredients. It adds to their nutrition and does not hold them back as long as you're not feeding them too many pumpkins all at one time. I'm going to go get another load of pumpkins to feed to our pigs in our training pen. They're smaller pigs, there are more of them, and then we'll talk about some of the downsides of feeding pumpkins to pigs. Back to our conversation on the downsides of feeding pumpkins to pigs is that I mentioned that it can cause diarrhea to the pigs. The biggest problem with feeding pumpkins to pigs is finding a source for the pumpkins. Now, I'll indicate that in a little bit, but if you're just driving around town and you see pumpkins on the side of the road that are left out for somebody to pick up to take to the landfill, go on and pick them up. But it's really not worth the time and energy, for me anyway, to drive around and look for pumpkins to pick up. Pumpkins are incredibly heavy, in large part because of the water content, especially for the feed value that you get out of them. And so, as a result, you just spend a lot of energy and effort handling the pumpkins. The other significant downside of feeding pumpkins to pigs Because smaller pigs have smaller digestive tracts, they grow faster with more concentrated feeds like grain and especially something like milk. So when you feed a lot of pumpkins to smaller pigs, they don't have the gastrointestinal tract to process the high volume, high fiber material like much larger pigs do. Now, the inverse of that is true as well when you have sows that you're only feeding, 4, 5, 6 pounds of grain per day, especially when they're gestating, then it's a great feed because it helps fill them up when they're eating. And to be honest with you, the other problem that I have with feeding pumpkins to pigs, as you can tell, is I don't want to hit the pigs when I'm throwing the pumpkins into the pen. Inevitably, you're going to hit the pigs. Now, one final consideration if you're going to feed pumpkins to pigs is that pigs, it doesn't matter how you cut it, but when you feed anything that's come in contact with meat to pigs, most states call that garbage feeding. So even if these pumpkins never entered somebody's kitchen, but even if they were processed with knives that process meat, most states will call that garbage feeding. All of these pumpkins have come from a place that was selling whole pumpkins. None of them have been cut. Some of them have been busted open just because you have the weight of the pumpkins on top of each other when they throw them in the trailer to bring them over here. And that's fine. I'll put some grain into, it's just an all stock grain that I'll put into their feeder. But the grain really helps, I think, their digestive tract and reduce or eliminate the amount of diarrhea that they have. Before I talk about the free ways to get pumpkins, if you're still watching this video, it'd help it a lot if you give it a big thumbs up. So, there are 4 ways that I know to acquire free pumpkins. The first is you can just pick them up on street corners and curbs and neighborhoods and that kind of thing. That was the way I started feeding pumpkins and started getting free pumpkins. The catch is it's only beneficial if you're driving through those neighborhoods anyway. Think about it like this. If you pick up 1,000 pounds of pumpkins, it can take a lot of time and a lot of energy. Realistically, it's equivalent to just under 150 pounds of dry feed. I pay 17.5 cents per pound for an all-stock feed, so that cost to me is $26.50. So if I spend half a day driving around trying to pick up 1,000 pounds of pumpkins, which I'll never do, the cost is just not worth it. However, if you see pumpkins, grab them and pick them up and take them to your pigs. The second way that I started off a couple years ago is I encourage people to just drop the pumpkins off at the farm. If you really think about it, there are so many pumpkins grown just for carving or for decoration, and so much of it just goes to waste after they're used for decorations. And a lot of people will just be happy for them to be repurposed and to used for something other than just filling up a landfill. Other people will do it just to be nice to you or to your farm, or because they want to know that pigs are getting a good bit of value out of it. Third, you can go pick up leftovers from grocery stores or nurseries or anywhere where pumpkins are sold. I've never had a whole lot of luck doing this because most places that sell pumpkins sell out of them, in my experience. Fourth and finally is you can get deliveries from leftovers, and this is where we get most of our pumpkins. The amount ranges from year to year. The first year we got a couple thousand pounds. Last year we got probably 4,000 or 5,000, 6,000 pounds. This year we've gotten, I can't begin to account how many 1,000 pounds of pumpkins we've gotten. And they come from organizations that do corn mazes or fall festivals or that kind of thing. And what they do is they can't sell them, and so they have to either haul them to the landfill or give them away to a pig farmer. It saves them a few $100s in tipping fees in the landfill, but they also are glad that they go to pigs and that they have some benefit that comes out of bringing the pumpkins to the farm. One thing is landfills are notorious for having nails and getting flat tires and trailers, and so even if it didn't cost them money to dump in a landfill, it's just nice for them to have a local place that they can drop the pumpkins off. So here's a basic introduction to feeding pumpkins to pigs. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. It helped me a lot. Share it with others who might find it interesting as well. If you do have pumpkins, try to find a pig farmer that you can send those pumpkins to. It'll help them out a lot as well. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We have several other videos about cheap or free feed for pigs, from acorns and milk, and growing cover crops for them. In fact, we have a playlist dedicated to growing cover crops for pigs, and we have a playlist dedicated to free, cheap, alternative pig feeds as well. So check them out. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.